Hey everybody, welcome. This 5-Watt Live is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. I have news about TrueFire. TrueFire is doing an Easter sale. They're starting it today. Starting a sale. It runs from today through the 23rd. All the courses are on sale, and the All Access Pass, see if I can say that 5 times fast. All Access Pass Plus is on sale for $99. So, and actually recently we had, I had a re-upping with TrueFire, and they gave me a new 50% off, but I think this edges that out slightly. So this is a good deal. Use the links in the description to go grab that. We're going to run the ad halfway through. We'll talk more about TrueFire at the end. So I love how people were kind of literal about this. I was laughing really hard. I even told Carol in the comments before we got started that she always upstaged me. She's funnier than me. Carol's just funnier than me. Your guitars say almost nothing about you. Not nothing, but almost nothing. You know, through the channel, I've met some people with serious money, guys with burst Les Pauls or even multiple burst Les Pauls, but also folks that get on me for claiming a $1,000 guitar is hardly a starter guitar. Okay, I'm overwhelmed today with clips. I'll come back to that. You can see the recent comment section on that video. It's likely not a surprise to anybody watching here that I'm a little obsessed with the why of things. Your guitar choices, that's what I mean. You guys were wonderfully literal. If your guitars are talking to you, then you need a therapist beyond my level. But if what I meant is your guitar choices do say something about you, but we probably can't guess what they are. We need some help from you to know what that is. I've been accused of being a guitar therapist online here, so I thought I would uncover my guitar stereotypes. We'd look at those, and you guys can join me as we go along. Tell me what you think of with each type of guitar, what kind of owner that would be, what are the stereotypes we have, and think about where they come from. Does that sound cool? That was the concept here. This kind of comes from other videos I've seen where people are like, you know, does your watch say anything about you? Does the way you dress say anything about you? And since I have a background in sociology that actually is around identity politics stuff, not politics, but identity formation, I'm always fascinated by the choices we make. I'm actually thinking about doing a new shirt that just says choices matter, because the choices we make have a lot to do with sort of then how we're seen everywhere. All right. So that's what we're going to do today. So see the descriptions in the links for the online store for t-shirts, hoodies, hats, etc. There is a link for Patreon, for the 5-Watt World Patreon. If you're thinking about starting a YouTube channel, think about buying my YouTube Mastery for Musicians course. I capture everything I've learned on my own and from my YouTube mentors like Rick Beato and Tim Pierce. The low price for this course is me trying to pay it forward to other musicians trying to build a channel. In addition, the 5-watt Barber electronics overdrive pedals are on sale. Not on sale. They're on sale. They're for sale on Reverb and directly from David. If you're overseas, not in the US, then you definitely want to go directly to David for that. And where am I? Yeah, that's it. We're back. We're live. That's it. All the links are in the description. Remember, if you have a comment or question, put a question mark. Beve hit and run here. He dropped the links in the description and then he had to go back to work. So we're on our own. Everybody behave and we'll have a good time here. Oh, I see Perry is in the chat. So we have a moderator of sorts. So I'm laughing at myself because I wrote a script. And then what I do is I think about what I need to support the script. And I start pulling assets. I start pulling images because me just yammering here is probably not going to carry the day. Well, at least not for me. I get bored with me. So I spent a lot of time. I just got cleaned up and ready to be here. But I spent a lot of time today pulling images. So you're going to see me bouncing. My eyes are going to be bouncing around the screen. And this is one of the more stressful things. I was talking to my editor, the guy that I just started working with, Mike Hall, who's in Berlin. And so I was saying that the thing about this is doing all the tech and hoping everything goes well. Although Lyle from Psionic Audio has sorted me out finally and all this stuff. And we've been on a run, knock on wood. The music in the intro, of course, was John Cordy from a recent video that he did called, where's John's video? Here we go. On a, he's playing a K-line Truxton with a roasted pine body, and he's clearly into it. So I've told this story before. It's a story about assumptions about guitars and what we think we need. Back when I put together a jazz quintet, I thought I really needed to have a big jazz guitar. So I bought a Fender Diaquisto Elite. This one looks just like it. It's an exaggeration to say I wish I still had this guitar, but it's a beautiful guitar. It's kind of like having a Steinway in your living room that you don't have enough time to play. And I started, and in the tiny corner of the restaurant where we had our weekly gig, the thing fed back like crazy. I just couldn't stand far enough away from the amp. And after a couple of months, I put this thing away and I put a set of flat wounds on a Parker Fly Deluxe, rolled on the Touch of Piezo pickup and to give it some air, and proceeded to play that guitar on that gig for the next 5 years, to nary a comment from the crowd. Not one, not even from the guitar players. Maybe that had something to do with my relative level of jazz chops, I'm not sure. So we might have an idea about what sort of guitar belongs on what sort of gig, but I can tell you from direct experience, those ideas are yours. Or mine in this case. Likely not the listeners. Even the guys on guitar, who are guitar players in the room, really are probably not going to put their ideas on you. Anyway, unless the listeners may be a record producer, then your whole level of satisfying someone else's ideas about what should be in your lap to get a certain sound, then it's a whole other thing. You know, I wonder if that's why bass players often make the best producers, because they don't carry with them the ideas of what guitar is required to get the tones for the track. Oh, we got a top chat from Son of the Wheel, Chair Pillow. Thank you, sir. PRS says PRS private stock and barely mediocre playing skills equals I'm a douchebag. Oh no, we're going to cover that. I saved PRS for the last, so we'll come back. Anyway, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking about stereotypes, and I went to a really small high school in a very rural part of upstate New York. But in junior high school, they went out of their way to teach us about stereotypes. And this was really interesting to me because in the part of upstate New York I lived in the 1960s and 70s, everybody was from little pockets. They were from Europe. And most of our grandparents had all come over here. On my side, on both my parents and both my parents' sides, both came over from the Netherlands. On my grandparents' level, age, I should say, my grandparents' generation, from my family's from Zeeland, right down next to Belgium. Even though the families lived less than 10 miles apart in Belgium, in the Netherlands, those families had never met until they ended up in upstate New York. And they were brought there by relatives that had moved there before them to, again, be farmers. So for me, learning about stereotypes was pretty abstract. We didn't get much practice, except when we were trying to think about the difference between the Dutch kids from Clifton Springs and the Italian kids from Lyons or Clyde, or Fairport, where Beato's from. So when I tried to imagine this, but I paid attention and I liked anthropology and those kinds of things in high school. So when I tried to imagine this in the guitar world, it showed me how ill-prepared I was for the variety of people and guitars that I would find in the world once I left that small town. But there is a reason that comedians so often joke that that lean heavily on stereotypes. They imply something that we all understand, or at least we've heard, whether it's said out loud or not. So I thought it might be fun for us to go through our stereotypes of different guitar owners and players and see if we can list why, and then why not, they're correct. That's the intro. What do you think? Does that sound like fun? Perry's getting ahead of me here. He says, let's not insult people. Keep the criticism to behavior and not characters. Totally agree. All right. I particularly said that when we're going to get to PRS. So the categories are predictable. And as we go, I'd like to ask you to put in the chat your stereotype. So if you see somebody with a Les Paul, we're going to do Les Pauls first. If you see somebody with a Les Paul, what do you assume? Put it in the chat. What kind of players do you assume their background is? What kind of music do you assume they're playing? Is it also stirred in? Is it stirred in that what kind of music they're playing? Like I said, just go ahead and put that in chat as briefly as you can so I can come back to it after I bare my own soul about what my stereotypes are. So for me, this says that your musical tastes are either rooted in the 1960s or 70s. You could do a lot worse. Or like Chris Buck, when you were growing up, you idolized Slash. I recently met a guy, a new friend of 5 Watt on Patreon, who recently satisfied his lifelong wish of buying a 3-pickup Les Paul Custom. Why? Because of the photo inside Elton John's live record, Here and There, he had as a kid. This matched a guy I met through the channel, someone very high up at Microsoft, a guy with a massive guitar collection, and he told me that every guitar in his collection was based on a record cover that he had seen along the way. So it was really very founded in his time as a kid looking at record covers. And he had actually hunted down one of the 17 Ibanez double necks ever built to see because of this picture inside the cover of Wings Over America. And I could do a whole episode on that guitar. It'd be very narrow audience, but it's a very cool guitar. And I actually saw one once in a shop. If the Les Paul player is on the high side of 50 and they're holding a Les Paul, I immediately wonder if it was Clapton or Page that lit that fire, or Jeff Beck, or Peter Green, or Billy Gibbons. All worthy idols, every one, and enough to send you on a playing and weightlifting routine that owning a Les Paul entails. So those are my stereotypes about Les Pauls. But on the other side of it, on a jazz guitar forum a few years ago, I ran across a thread asking about the best small jazz guitar. And one of the contributors correctly pointed out that a Les Paul would be considered a small jazz guitar. I mean, Les was a jazz guy, at least back in the 50s, as we all know. And then I had to remember, and this is going to be a little musical interlude because I was able to grab a clip that didn't set off a copyright strike, of a Swedish jazz guitarist named, and I apologize in advance if I get this wrong, Ulf Vakenius. Somebody out there help me, I'm dying. Who gigged a dot neck Les Paul Studio, all black with gold hardware, when he was in the Oscar Peterson quartet for many, many years. He put a set of flat wounds on it and spent endless years studying Pat Metheny's style, and a Les Paul, and that Les Paul Studio was his main guitar. He's since moved on to playing Benedetto guitars, but go find him when he was with Oscar Peterson on YouTube, because he's a smoking player, and that it's got some serious Les Paul goodness. And I've got a little tiny clip of Ulf at the Jazz Baltica playing with meth. So I'm going to run it here. That's the little musical bit we have today. So that's Les Pauls. I'm going to see, I want to see who you guys think of and what you immediately think of when you think of Les Pauls. Deja says, see more Les Pauls live on stage via punk hardcore metal bands, pound for pound. You know, this has a ton to do with, like all identity stuff, what your influences are has a lot to do with what era you lived in. I'm looking for Les Paul stuff. Hey, Bill. Bill X from France, from Brittany. Les Pauls just look cool. Still can't believe I sold my first one. Well, I can't either believe it either, Bill. Barry's right. Tool. Looking for other input here. Cat's Music Journey says, depends on the Les Paul. A greenie and a modern are two very different instruments. Interesting. Playing with meth. So Pat Metheny, that betrays my hanging around a jazz music school department where everybody said Metheny so often that they had to shorten it. And I probably picked that up from Beato when I was taking lessons with him. Yeah, playing with Pat Metheny, sitting with Pat Metheny, which is a riot because Ulf clearly has a ton of Metheny influences in his playing. We're going to come back to Stratocasters actually very soon, so we will come back there. Demiola absolutely played a Les Paul. It was a big part of my Les Paul wishes early on. James Caldwell says, I bought my Les Paul because of the Eagles and Joe Walsh. I love Joe Walsh and Felder's tones. That's what I'm talking about. Tell me what it is you think of. What do you assume? DB says, Toy Caldwell equals Les Paul, but I'm a redneck. And Chris was able to get here. Chris, Gig with Vintage. The guitar I bring to a gig is definitely a message. Not the brand, not the model, the actual guitar. This is my way of saying, this is what you're getting tonight. It's like, this is it, huh? There you go. Victor says, Jimmy Page first. All right. I think I have time. There you go. Thin Lizzy. Colin Crummy, thank you for the super chat there. We need to talk about the Instagram dwelling fanboy guitarist. There's actually a video that a bass player that I followed, and he actually did the bass playing on the jazz bass history. Anthony Mutaraja, that's his name. Anthony did a whole video once about students who would come who basically were just YouTube dwellers who really never picked up their instrument. And they'd ask them to play something in their first lesson, and they wouldn't really have played it all, but they were kind of loving being in the culture of guitar. And I think that's what Colin's talking about. It's very interesting to me, because I would say that we have that right here. We have, hopefully everybody finds time to play. Blue Gubrius put it in the chat before we got started that his guitarists say to him, make more time for me, or something to that effect. Mario V says, I have learned never to judge a player by their guitar. I've seen people shred on a Firefly. Let the hands speak. Good. That's an excellent one. ASIC13 says, Les Paul means I got lucky at 16, 1990 to buy a 1980 Les Paul Custom. That's still my main guitar. There you go. Dave Gallagher, heavy metal rock. Les Paul's name was Lester Pulfus originally, before he changed it for the stage. Okay, all right, let's move on to Stratocasters. So like before, load up in the chat with the kind of music you immediately think of when you see a Strat. And I'm going to say, you're going to hear me go all the way into different colored Strats invoke different kinds of playing to me. And I make assumptions based on what I see. There are so many famous Strat players. I would argue that the majority of guitar heroes either started out or ended on Strats. Avi Eckhart's here. Eckhart. Avi, it's good to see you from Paris. I hope things are well there. And no one mentioned Buckethead. I'm glad that's an influence for you. Okay, so I'm going to do my Strat stuff now. Like so many kids, like so many kinds of music have been played on a wildly flexible Stratocaster that we just have our own personal history that leads to our assumptions, I think. Given my own musical background, I always think blues, often Texas Vaughan Brothers inflected, or soaring. Let me see. I grabbed all these images. Let's use them. Here we go. Oh, I was talking about jazz. I left out Les. Les at the Iridium for years, decades even, would also be an example of someone playing jazz on a Les Paul. So the Vaughan Brothers are who I think of right away when I think of Stratocasters. I'll admit that stereotyping of Strat players in particular for me is influenced by history and the media showing us the different color Strats, and those send me my assumptions careening in a specific direction. A late 50s two-tone burst, that's Eric Johnson. White with a maple board, that's Jimi Hendrix. Or Nile Rodgers, for that matter, who, infected by some of his own hero worship, painted his Strat white to be more like Jimmy's. Candy Apple Red or Black on Black, that's Gilmore, of course. White Custom Shop, the guitar he played most of his career, later career, is a Custom Shop from '94 while he was working on his signature, and that was the guitar that Beck played for the last half of his career. And practically any modern variant with a color with a white guard and a maple neck can invoke Clapton for me. This is from the Journeyman years. Though not my favorite period of his playing, the images lurk in my subconscious. But it's interesting, that all is sort of in a rock and blues thing for me. And none of it would explain Ry Cooder or Sonny Landreth or Lowell George. And those guys all did very similar but very different, all slide players that I mentioned, things on a Stratocaster. And so those are kind of the things that I run up against when I find myself thinking about Stratocasters. So I'm curious to know what you guys are thinking of and gals thinking of when you're thinking Stratocaster. So let me jump over here into the comments. We're still doing the, let me get back here. We're still doing the literal thing. I like it. Darth Regis says, my guitars say that clearly I took engineering instead of practicing. Perry, Hendrix sounded better on the various pre-CBS Strats he played early in his career. Just my opinion. Another Deja says, Jimmy. George Harrison's Rocky Strat. If Lyle is here, he's applauding because he's a big Strat because of Harrison guy. Just Plain Blaze, Strat Gilmore. The Strat sound will always be SRV for me. That's me. Oh, Amanda Coombs says Keith Scott, the guitar player in Ryan Adams' band. If I have that right. Have I had that right, Amanda? Gilmore, SRV, Clapton, SRV, Hendrix. Hank Marvin, Buddy Holly, old guys. I like it, Marty. That, I don't know if that's not nice or not. Strat guys get driven to work by their girlfriends. Scott Bogfoot. Ooh, coming after the Guitar Heroes. Strat equals over flamboyant player. Thank you for your honesty, Scott. I think that when I see a trumpet player on a jazz gig. Just saying. Just opening up my soul here. That's me. There you go. Refin, Olympic White, Hardtail Strat. There you go, Buddy Guy. More in a deep blues vein. That's what you're thinking, huh? The Holly Jingle, Buddy Holly. Dick Dale from the Burnt Gerbil. Clapton as well. Jeff Beck, EVH, Hendrix. Hendrickson SRV. Jeff Beck and Robin Ford for a time. Robin Ford again. Robin actually has been out gigging. If you see some very recent clips, you'll see him playing a Strat. Jalapeno Wario says, not only should everyone have a Les Paul, I know this was the last topic, but you got to go back to this guy. He's got an Aston Martin on his icon. Everyone should also have a Flying V. Iggy and the Stooges will tell you. There you go. All right. That's excellent. You guys are doing, you guys embrace this stuff and you I can't say it. Wade right in. It was a lot of asset collection today. Trower. Walter Trout. That's good. To Robin Ford. Huh. Joe Hernandez 1210 says, I think Stratocaster, I think less expensive than a Les Paul. That's probably generically true. There you go. Steve Hackett. I actually am doing it's in the thumbnail actually, I'm holding it. I'm doing a video on the short history of the Les Paul Studio. And I say in there that I actually went down the Les Paul road early on with a bad copy in my early, probably was like when I was about 20. I bought a Hondo 2 and it was because of Steve Hackett. All right. And we are right on time for, let's run the TrueFire ad and we'll come back and do the rest of the guitars. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I've used them for years. Appropriately enough, I'm currently having fun going through Andy Wood's modern Telecaster shred course. With over 2 million users worldwide, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, TrueFire has lessons to enhance and inspire your playing. Get 35% off courses using the promo code 5watt35. Or like I do, sign up for the All Access Pass to use the entire TrueFire catalog. I really like TrueFire, and I think if you give them a shot, you'll like them too. Sign up using the link in the description to support 5 Watt World and get some great lessons at the same time. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. And we're back. Amanda says, yes, squack it. I never heard that. Is that a squonk Hackett thing? I don't know. Chris Cross, amen. Rory Gallagher, absolutely. Her, there you go, Stuart R. I mentioned that in a Strat video. Okay, there we go. So, where are we going next? You know where we're going. So, Telecasters. How about you? When you see a Telecaster, what kind of music do you assume is going to come out? And this category seems immediately obvious, I think, on its face value, and yet everything's been done on a Telecaster. But I would be the first one to say that I was late to the actual Telecaster game. I've said here before, one of my first real guitar was a 72 thin line with wide range humbuckers on it. So really not the full Telecaster experience. I was late to that game, but when it was Brad Paisley's Play album, where are we? Where are we in the pile of assets I've built here? There we go. The Play album that really broke me out of my jazz coma. And a Tele for me is a country guitar, or a guitar in the hands of someone wanting to play that kind of music. Chicken picking, a hot Vox amplifier, bridge pickup goodness. I went back upstream from Paisley to discover the world that my buddy Zach Childs had lived in all along. I even own a Paisley Signature Road Worn Esquire. And I kind of would like one of the silver metal flake ones too. For photos and stuff. But when I think back to college years, I was a devotee of Roy Buchanan. And a Telecaster was a blues guitar for me at that time. And then shortly after that time, I got into Robin Ford. And I had no idea how much he was making his 1960 Telecaster sound like a Les Paul bridge pickup through his Dumble rig. And then there's my Bill Frisell, my good buddy Tim Lurch, and Julian Lodge, breaking down the bridge pickup stereotype world of tellies and reminding us of how great the open tone control beauty of that net pickup really is. But here, right away, there's a lot of variety, even for me. So my stereotypes for a Telecaster are very, very mixed. I get my Telecaster stereotypes working, and I'm forced to turn to somebody and ask, as anybody should in a situation when it's unclear about identity, to just very politely say, why a Telecaster? Who are some of your favorite players? Like, where are you coming from that you ended up on a Telecaster? That's me. That's my Telecaster world view, if you will. So, and there's none of them behind me today. So, what do you think? Zanzibar 4KY7 says Page sounded like a Les Paul on a Telly is what I think of. David Barber likes to say that Jimmy Page sold more Les Pauls with his Telecaster than anyone else ever has. Vincent Santiago, Ed King, Keith Urban and his 40th anniversary Telly named Clarence. I think that's named Clarence for Clarence White. Is that right? There you go. I quoted David before David could get in the chat. I stole your line, dude. Ooh, Eric gives Danish Pete the nod. Jeff Harper. Hey, Jeff. Country blues and rock. Buck Owens, Albert Collins, and Steve Cropper. Yeah, see? That's a pretty mixed bag. I like that. Stuart R. says, I see a Telly. I just think pro. Nice. Terry Kath. Very good. Well, there, son of a wheelchair pillow, at least gave David credit. Thank you. Daryl Moore thinks American rock, the boss, for Springsteen. Neil Levine says Dan Steinhardt from TPS. Love it. There you go. Mari V says Mike Stern. I should have included Mike, but I was kind of getting tired of digging up all the pictures. Marty Neary's Brad Paisley and John 5. Nice. Chronic Timmy says, when I think Telly, Keith Richards, Tom Petty, Tom Morello, and Jim Root. That's a nice mix. Brett says Zach Childs, Tim Lurch. There you go. I said those guys already. Recently, Steve Wilson. I think Steve Wilson, if I remember from the rig rundown, it's like made in Mexico that he came across when he was recording. And Mike Einzinger. What band is Mike Einzinger from? Somebody educate me. I don't know that person. Willem Kerpel says Telecaster plus a Marshall is a barky heaven. Our buddy Ray Mears says, I was lucky to see Roy Buchanan twice in my hometown of Chicago, about 12 feet away in a small venue. Your ears must still be ringing. No one gets more music with a guitar and a twin 12. His touch, tone, choice were amazing. Where is it? There we go. The great Sasquatch from behind the cheddar curtain, the inimitable Gristle Master, Craig Cock. You're like on payroll. That is a full Cock-worthy intro right there. Deja Deba says, I automatically associate it with country. But my favorites are Julian Lodge and Jimmy Page. Valve tone, everything. It's a great guitar, different picker combinations. Take it almost anywhere you want. Strummer? I always mispronounce that, don't I? It's not Strummer, it's Strummer. Yes? Strummer? Perry, save me, will you? Bill Shea. This guy's a jazzer. Ted Green, Ed Bickert, Bill Frisell, and Lodge. But Bruce Springsteen is why I bought one. Yeah, I remember staring at that record cover thinking the same thing as a kid. But I have to say, the one that made it cool for me was the inside jacket for Damn the Torpedoes by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers with Mike Campbell with that blackguard. I had no idea what that guitar was. I just knew that on the record it sounded amazing, and I just thought it was an amazing photograph. Dirt Styler says he prefers with modern appointments, belly cut, modern brass block saddles like a deluxe or ultras. I actually have to say that I like a belly cut on a Telly too. I know it's sacrilege, but I kind of don't care. Mark says there is no right or wrong. It comes down to play. Whatever makes you play. There's no right or wrong. Mark Luck. It took me until my mid-50s to buy a Tele after playing Strat since the age of 16. So simple for gigs and makes you a better player, in my opinion. You know, it's interesting. John Cordy has just gone a thing where he ended up buying a whole bunch of Strats to look at, a whole range of Fender Strats. But he also, in that period of time, bought a new Nachocaster. Not new to him, Nachocaster, and a Danocaster, and just this week, a K-Line Thruxton, which is a T-style guitar as well, made with a roasted pine body. I think he's going to move that through. So if that's something that gets you interested, go ahead and reach out to him. And he says the same thing. He's totally a dedicated Strat guy, but he would say that Telecaster, he thinks, is the ultimate gigging guitar for him. Now that's an interesting conversation. Basil Tiffany says, my interest in Teles was spontaneous. It came from the inside. I used to think they were hideous. Then one day I loved them. That's worthy of a long conversation over a cup of coffee and figure out where that came from. That's really interesting. Keith Richards, Keith and the Boss. The Tele spectrum is wide and deep, I would say. Amanda says, my dad played a Tele and the sound is my childhood. So I could only say him. That's great. That's very sweet. Son of a Man reliability. Muddy Waters, a 60s Telecaster. Whoa. Keith Richardson, Brewer Phillips, who played with Hound Dog Taylor. John Q, Springsteen. Pete Anderson, an early Dwight Yoakam fan. Chrissy Hine. All right, we got a couple more guitars to go here. I think we're getting, oh, thanks. Santiago says, Enzinger played with Incubus. Thank you. Carol, Telly Chili, must be lunchtime. Perry is a contrarian. Whoa, typecasting here. No one mentioned Mike Bloomfield Chample. You know, Bloomfield kind of bounced around from guitar to guitar. He had the Tele, and then he had the P90 Les Paul, and then he traded that for a 59. Strummer. It is Strummer. People correct me all the time, and I don't know. Ooh, Britt has an original 63 Tele. Springsteen and his tone is what got me hooked. A 63. Very nice. Phil Kirchin. Then we're going to jump here. Robbie Robertson. Vincent Armanino. I ought to be able to pronounce that from where I'm from. Okay. David, no different guy. No, different guy. I guess we're talking about something else. I think Mike E also plays with Biffy Clyro. Oh, well, you guys would know this stuff. You're youngsters. I'm an old guy. I'm an old jazz guy. Okay, so let's do SGs next. I think this might be simple. Carol says, a Tele headstock is the side view of a woman's foot. You know, I was going to take a photograph for Instagram of my PRS SC Silver Sky. It's over here. And take a picture of just the side of the headstock, because when it's in my lap, I love that guitar. When it's sitting on the stand like that, it's ugly to me. And James Burton. Amen. Okay, so SGs. This feels very straightforward for me. It's about this guy. I'm likely too comfortable with my SG stereotypes. I am. I'm too comfortable with it. So it's good we're doing this. I need some help. This is the rock guitar, and there is only one man to blame, credit, in my opinion, Angus Young. My modern SG world of players is also pretty limited. I know Robin Ford has a strange little amalgam of an SG special that he often uses in the studio. And I've learned that Alan Holsworth was playing an SG with Soft Machine when I was listening to them. But that's it. So besides rock, let's hear your assumptions about players that you can think of with an SG. And I should have included trucks. Absolutely. I thought of that as soon as I went to jump in the shower and get cleaned up for the live stream. I thought trucks is exactly where it needs to be. There. Hey, there's Veronica. Thanks, Veronica. That's correct. That is the correct answer. Angus Young is the correct answer. Iommi. Yep. SG Matt Guitar Murphy. Was that an SG? Scott, is that right? Hey Joe, put your favorite SG player there in the chat, Joe. Albert Collins, we're catching up. Jerry Garcia, that's correct, for a little while. Guthrie Govan, I didn't know Guthrie when he was playing an SG. Phil X, yes, actually come all the way back to Gibson. Barry Goudreau. Is that the lead singer with Boston? Didn't he play a Melody Maker? Somebody help me. Frank and Dweezil, same guitars actually. There you go, Lyle's here. Harrison, Badfinger, Derek Trucks, and the Jayhawks. Nice. You guys have a much broader batch of listening when it comes to guitars than I do. That's the truth. I spent so much time listening to horn players and trumpet players, saxophone players and trumpet players when I was into my jazz thing. Sergeant Grinch, SG equals Clapton during the Cream era. Marty Neary says Townsend live at Leeds. Perry says hot take, Iommi is more influential than Angus. Anyway, I'd say Emma Ruth Rundle, who I care about more than any other musician using an SG. Early Santana, also a special like Townsend's. There we go. Somebody, Frank Marino from Mahogany Rush. Is that correct? It's all a big quiz for me. Dr. Bill Ball says Mama Thornton. Robbie Krieger. Ami guitar. I think that's debatable whether an EB bass is really an SG. Mike Oldfield, absolutely. Sister Rosetta Tharpe, absolutely. Only later though. She was playing a lot of other stuff. That was once kind of Gibson got hip to the fact that people were paying attention to Rosetta Tharpe, I think. Son of Man, Mickey Jones of Man. Guess you didn't want me to miss that. John Cipollini. Okay, I should know this. John Cipollini. Give me the band, Gordon. Huh, okay. I'm overdue for rewatching that. The Cold North Wind. Tom York, Brian Malco, and Chino Moreno. I talk about Tom York in the Telecaster Players Who Changed the World. Sheer volume and number of people that saw him playing one live. Yeah, Chris, I'm with you. I gave it a good college try last year and had an SG for about 8 months. And then I just couldn't adjust to the, and I can get my PRS mirror. One of them has pickups, but I'm still on the hunt for the perfect pickup to make it sound more like an SG, something that gives it a little more early 60s kind of sound. The SG actually was Harrison's main guitar for a couple of years in the Beatles. 64. Thanks, James. Barry was the second guitar player in Boston. Sterling Music in Text says Lester Pulfus, briefly. I'd say very briefly, or maybe only in pictures, but Ed, this is a job for a strap. Great show. Glad to spend my time with you. Being disabled, how do you keep a guitar from sliding out of your wheelchair? If that's a serious question, I would say it's a strap thing. And actually, I don't know. We could have a conversation. Email me at 5wattworld, and I could talk Strandbergs and stuff. There are a lot of guitars that are small enough, like my little mirrors are small enough to kind of sit comfortably on a strap in your lap and still be able to wrestle with it and play it. A lot of votes for Rosetta Tharpe. I like it. Stephen Brown says, nobody is mentioning Mary Ford. I think Mary probably played the SG a little more, but she really played those early. She kind of played whatever Les was loving that week. I think they played a lot of matching guitars, and she's an amazing player. So it looks to me, David says, Elliot Easton, it looks to me that my sense of Telly's being all over the ballpark is correct. This is endless. You guys, I mean, this SG list too is endless. There we go. Okay, we got one more guitar type to talk about, and I'm going to remind everybody, as Perry did earlier, that talk about the playing and understand that this is an exercise in why we have the stereotypes we do. PRS always ends up being a big, controversial, noisy, a noisy thing. So yeah, so we're going to talk about PRSs now. I got a few in the room here. I was a longtime reluctant PRS guy. So this is one of the big current stereotypes, I think. What and who do you think of when you see a PRS? And be nice. Me, I immediately go to the unique playing of David Grissom. Let me get David's picture on here as he belongs to be. One of my biggest influences. I can't play anything like David, and God, I wish I could. He just hits the guitar way hard, and I'm much the opposite end of the spectrum from trying to play jazz for years and years. For me, he typifies everything that's good about PRS. He can rip all of that stuff he does on an Esquire, but he chooses to walk his own path. And Paul Smith was smart enough to go down that path with David. I think that the PRS DGT is one of their top selling models, and it has been since it came out in 2008. As a matter of fact, my buddy Zach Childs just got a PRS SE DGT, and he's loving it because it fills a niche. It does something closer to a Fender, and yet still some sounds that are more like that humbucking thing that is just different. And as Zach said in the video, you should all go watch this video from today. You should absolutely. He said he could totally do a gig, like if he had a string break on. If he took the DGT SE as his backup guitar and he had a string break, he could totally play the gig, his country gig that he has. So, and then for me, when I was pulling up out of my jazz coma in the early 2000s, I asked Rick to point me at some of the music, the best music that I missed. In particular, I was doing a lot of home recording, and I wanted to get examples of things that that really were great recording recorded records, and he steered me towards Linkin Park. And that, of course, then you talk, I think somebody ever put it in chat, I saw it going by, Brad Delson was playing PRS in a pretty big way at that time, and heavy music. And I was through him that I realized that PRS had become associated with heavier music. And I had missed that whole window where PRS was thought of as a kind of a heavy metal guitar. But for me, PRS then also includes Brent Mason and Jimmy Herring, and both of those guys using PRS guitars. And then, of course, John McLaughlin, all of whom, those three, smear lines of style with their PRS style guitars. I couldn't find a great picture of McLaughlin with his new signature guitar, the short run of private stock guitars that they made. They had a couple of them go through ish. They were some of the prettiest guitars I've ever seen. So how about you guys? Help me out. Who comes to mind when you see a PRS in the hands of a player? What do you think? Dave Gallagher says John Mayer. Wow, you guys are wading right in here. PRS equals Creed. Dave Manson says Daniela from V from The Warning. Mark Holcomb from Periphery. Mark Lettieri now. Stuff is flying by. Zach Meyer. These are the people you think of. Is there a type of music that comes to your mind immediately? James Caldwell says, I didn't know what PRS guitars were until I saw Natalie Merchant's guitarist, can't remember her name, play the solo to Carnival Live on late night TV. Also, STP uses PRS. Let's get John off here so we have a better backdrop for the photo, for the comments. Also Grissom, Dickie Betts. I saw Alex Lifeson go by earlier. Mario says, never understood the PRS hate. They were engineered for players. Paul has designed instruments to be played by everyone. Carlos Santana, somebody else saying Carlos earlier. Creed again. Santana, Tremonti, Grissom. The Eagles. There you go. David's known Paul Smith for a long time. Although when I see a PRS, I think Paul Smith, a local legend of designing, building, and playing his own guitars. Lyle says, from Sonic Audio, says, I played the Lifeson Model CE. It was a horrible guitar. The DGT is the only PRS model I would consider. I actually had a semi-hollow CE, and I had a couple of them actually, and I don't have them now, so maybe that says it. I have always said I couldn't deal with the body shape. It just doesn't do it for me, even though there's one right over there. But I have to say that the middle position had a thing that was amazing. On a non-strat bolt neck guitar, it was really incredible. And I know a guy, Kane Miller in Florida, who gigs one for that reason. It's just got this great middle tone, and it's got a great neck and a great bridge sound as well. You know, PRS has this reputation as being sort of generic. I couldn't disagree more. I find them to be, I have 4 different PRS Mira X's. They have different pickups in them from Ron Ellis, and they're all amazing, and they sound completely different. Very, very different guitars. Slightly different weights and stuff, but like the white one and my bright red one are almost the same weight, and they sound very, very different. So, see, now this is what I was trying to avoid. Not if you play so in other words, if you play PRS, you're a dork. No, everybody has to kind of look at everybody's different associations and sort of embrace that. Everybody's got their own journey, you know? Alex Lifeson again. Orianthe. There we go. There's another good one. Tim Mahoney of 311 or 311. I never know how to say that band. You guys laugh at me every time, so enjoy yourselves on my expense. Mayer. Opeth. That's right. Tor. Canal von Karakoth, 1993, metal and mostly rock. I don't think they've ever done a Flying V. They did some pretty crazy guitars, custom guitars over the years, but that didn't go into production. Perry says bro country and naughties, rock, new metal are the PRS genres for him. Chris Vanderbos says PRS guitars are a little too pretty for my taste. Played a used wood library at a local GC yesterday, and while it was gorgeous, it didn't play like $4,000. I've owned a couple of wood library guitars, and they're absolutely amazing. But they do kind of give me the same feeling that my Collings give me. I kind of feel like I have a really great week-long vacation parked in a guitar. And I guess I'm probably getting to the point where I would, and I've said it here before, that I'd rather get a week in Paris than maybe 2 weeks in Paris for the price of like one of my Collings. And I might end up doing that yet. In the meantime, I'm playing these $1,000 PRSs that add up to the same amount of money. Chris Quinn says, I think of them as a do-it-all guitar. Joe C says, think of David Grissom. I watch his music performances on YouTube. He is an amazing bluesy player. He is that. Kurt says, Mr. DGT. Another vote from Texas there. Interesting. Veronica says, no desire for a PRS. Chronic Timmy, Mike Mushak, who did the baritone guitar that everybody in Nashville seems to have in their rack these days, and Carlos Santana and Nickelback. This is great. The whole idea of this exercise, of course, and you could hear me trying to do it myself, is to examine what it is that we think of as stereotypical. What is it when we see a certain style of guitar, and why do we think so? And I think that is always a healthy thing to try to do, to figure out why we are the way we are, and then be open to everything else that are the possibilities around the people that are around us. Everybody's sitting there with a completely different set of expectations and their own stereotypes. There's overlaps in stereotypes and they're generalizations, and for that reason they sort of make sense. But even just here, you could see how distant people's backgrounds are and how completely different people's expectations would be coming out of those kinds of things too. If I had a jazz gig these days, I would probably take that white or the dark cherry if it needed to lay in the background more. Maybe throw a set of small flats on it. I keep threatening to do that to one of the guitars, and after watching Ulf again today, I might yet do it. So that's the whole idea. That was my whole idea of doing this today. If anybody has some questions you want to sneak in here at the end, I got a couple of minutes. Maybe Lee has a question since he just got here. Yeah, so here's my thing. That PRS is here because it's the nicest Strat style guitar I've ever played. And for the money, I just couldn't get near it. I think I'd have to be in a custom shop or custom built to sound like that. Right down to the pickups. It's also a guitar that I haven't thought about changing the pickups, and that's not me at all. I know some people with some great pickups. I actually have a straight up Tele. I have an Esquire, a Fender Esquire. And the Strandbergs always were in that niche for me. Yeah, the thin flat neck. Yeah, I agree. That's not a neck I do well with. The current thin necks, Lyle, are not as thin. It's almost like when they reuse these words so much, you almost have to say, like I do, the pattern necks from 2009, not to be confused with the wide fat, because it's almost a wide fat, but it's not. And it's not a DGT, which is slightly narrower. And I mean a 32nd narrower. So it's hard to guess. Perry's basically making the argument that I've made before, and he and I've talked about it. PRS wasn't there at the formation of the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, guitar playing that so many guitar players lean on for their influences. And yeah, it's probably a good generalization is that guitar players are really, really pretty traditional. If you play a Kubicki factor bass, you're definitely going to find who it is that knows their guitar history. If you're playing a Kubicki, that is very cool, in my opinion. That's the assumption you get from me, is that you know what you're doing. Yeah, a couple of people said that when they think of PRS, they think of me. I'm a bit of a fanboy for this particular model. I don't own a lot of the other ones. Well, I think there's going to be a new Spinal Tap movie. So right, we need to get to those people, Veronica. Okay. All right. We are out of time here. I'm at the end of the list. You guys are still rolling them in. I love it. I enjoyed this. I hope you did. It was a brutal pile of assets to pull together, but it was good doing it. I want to remind everybody to check in the link in the description for TrueFire. They're having that sale that runs from the 15th to the 23rd. They've got a $99 all-access pass sale going there. By using the link in the description to get to TrueFire, you're telling TrueFire that you got there from here, from 5 Watt World, and they continue to love me, which is important because I love them, and it's important. That's important that that's balanced. Thanks to all of you for being here. Until next time, I want to thank you all for being a part of the 5 Watt World. Take care. Bye-bye.